Awesome. Hey, welcome everybody to Live with Dan. Today's show, we have two very special guests, which we'll get to in a minute. We'll be talking about the MRII's recent study that they released around AI and in the workplace, the trends, the good, the bad, the ugly. We'll cover it all today here on Live with Dan. A few housekeeping items. Before we get into it, if you want to post a comment or a question, feel free to post it in whatever platform you're viewing this on, and we will hopefully be able to answer those at the end of the show, or even if they come up through the show and it makes sense to answer them, we'll do it live as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. We have Ed Keller and Anthony Jackel. Ed, you want to introduce yourself, and then Anthony, you can follow Ed up.
Yeah, hey, great to be with you. Thanks, Dan, for having us, and good to be speaking to everybody who's tuning in. I'm Ed Keller. I'm the Executive Director of MRII, the Market Research Institute International. We're a not-for-profit educational institute, and our mission is to help educate, train, and hopefully motivate the world's market research community. We offer a variety of ways that we do this, including courses that we offer in partnership with University of Georgia. We run a monthly webinar series with SOMAR. We're building out some other training and development assets as well. And one of the things that we do is we publish an annual study about the market research industry from the perspective of market researchers, and we'll dig into that in a few minutes. Anthony?
Yeah, hi everyone. And yeah, Dan, thanks for having us on. Nice to meet you all. My name is Anthony Jackel. In my day-to-day job, I head up consumer analytics at Ferrara Candy. So the brands you know and love, like Nerds, Sweet Tarts, and Laffy Taffy. But also, I volunteer and on the board for MRII. Been on it since 2020, actually. So it's been almost over 4 years. Really great group to be a part of, and with an awesome mission that I'm very passionate about with educating and continue to make the insights and research industry the best that it possibly can be. And specifically with today's topic, I feel like I've been excited as we've been going through the results, excited to talk about it too, because I feel like AI has been a topic that everyone keeps talking about. You hear about it at every conference, and it tends to be about the tools, the techniques, the things that we can do with it. But I don't know that many people have paused to actually talk to people that are in the insights and research industry to understand the perceptions of it, what's happening with it, who's actually using it, how are they using it, what do they think about the futures of it. So excited to talk about some of the findings that we found through our research.
No, that's awesome. Thanks, Ed and Anthony. And I should add, I'm also MRII board member and president-elect. So next year, I guess I'll be running the show with Ed. So I'm excited for that. Hopefully, Ed, right? No, it'll be good.
Hopefully you're excited, Dan. I'm excited, so hopefully you're excited as well.
I'm pumped. I'm excited for it. So, and I just wanted to add that, Question Pro helped out on the quantitative side of the study, and another partner of ours, Brand Riffs, helped out on the qualitative side. So we did mixed mode and had both of those as a part of this study, which I'm sure we'll get into today. Do one of you want to take it and just kind of give a brief overview of like how many completes we got, sort of the methodology around it, and just kind of give a brief overview before we dive into some of those interesting results?
Yeah, I'll be happy to. So we conducted a survey, and as Dan said, it was an online survey using Question Pro. We interviewed about close to 400 market research professionals from around the world. There's a heavy concentration in the U.S., but it is a global sample. It included a mix, obviously, by gender, a mix by age, tenure in the industry. And one of the things that I think we'll be talking about as we do this, we also have a mix of people who are on the research agency or consulting or people who are creating the market research studies. And then we've got a sample as well of people like Anthony who come from the client side. And that's one of the most interesting findings about all this is the difference between people who are on the provider side versus on the client side. This is the second year that we've conducted a study about the market research community. A year ago, we had a little bit on AI. If you can remember back, it was only a year ago that ChatGPT was just coming onto the scene, and we had seen it then as something that had a small number of people who were using it, but a very large number of people who said, I think we would benefit from being trained about this. So that was in the early days, and here we are a year later, and we knew this year that we were going to be seeing a lot more about AI. It's the number one topic at every single conference any of us have been at. So we not only tracked some of the data that we had collected a year ago, but we also then did a deep dive into AI. And as Anthony said, a lot of people talking about the tools, the techniques, the need, but we were quite interested in understanding people in the rank and file of the market research profession itself. How are they looking at AI? What are they excited about? What are they concerned about? How are they using it today? Where do they think it should be going tomorrow? And that's the deep dive that we took.
Yeah, no, definitely. It feels like AI and this whole Gen AI has been around forever, but it's seemingly, about a year and a half into it now. So it's interesting. Well, why don't we dive in and talk about, AI's role in the workplace? This was some interesting data that, I know we collected around AI and how it's being used and usage. So do one of you want to speak to this and kind of go over some of the more interesting points here?
Yeah, I'll take this one, Ed. So this was really interesting. So last year, as Ed mentioned, this is the second year of us doing this like research on research with researchers. And last year we asked a lot of people, like, what are the tools that they're using today versus what are the tools they think are going to have the highest impact tomorrow? And this question specifically was what popped out as so interesting that last year on the left, this was the actual usage today of what people and what skills people are actually using today. And again, as Ed mentioned, the ChatGPT, I think, came out Q4 of 2022. We ran this study at the beginning of 2023. So there wasn't much usage or like people saying that they're actually using generative AI and ChatGPT. It was one that people talked about maybe for the future of tomorrow, and they think it could have high impact. But we saw a 25-point percentage increase in the usage of what people are actually saying that they're leveraging in their work today, which was, very big. Like, we can talk about the usage and how people are using it later on, but that was one that stood out. So we were happy that we did some additional research on AI to get a little bit more behind the scenes of, well, how are they using it? What are some of the benefits that they're seeing today? But this was a huge spike that we saw. And also text analytics, AI generally, we also saw some decent spikes. So clearly this space of what we're talking about today is definitely seeing some momentum behind it, even in the industry today.
Ed, anything to add?
No, I would just, I think this was the place that was kind of confirmatory of what we expected. I would also just point out, and we'll talk more about this, even though everybody's talking about AI, if you can see how many people are using it today, it's about a third of our sample who are using it today. So everyone's talking about it. Not everybody's using it yet. A lot of room for growth. And one of the things, hopefully we'll have some time for, Dan, is to be able to look at the differences between people who are the sort of the power users today and how they're thinking about it and using it today versus those who are maybe more in the lurking mode, kind of looking in but not necessarily jumping in yet.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll definitely get to that. So moving on, I think you kind of went into this a little bit, but anything else to add here around, these most used skills today versus the high impact skills of the future? Looks like there's some interesting points here.
Yeah, I think we kind of touched on it. It's like we asked about what are the things people are using today versus the future, and there's always like a very interesting, quad chart that you'll see in the deeper research that we'll publish in a few weeks, where we kind of map out the today versus the tomorrow. And again, what jumps out to us is that even though there might be less people using some of these tools like generative AI and then also just like machine learning and AI, people in the industry are saying they think that these could be the things that could have a very high impact in the future. So the question we then turn to is, okay, how do we start prepping ourselves to learn about these tools and new methods that might be out there to, bring into our companies or bring to our clients if you're on the vendor agency side to really be ahead of what's to come in the future.
Yeah, that is interesting here with some of the usage and then impact. It's sort of inverse relationships here on some of these, even some of the bigger ones. So that's certainly something to keep in mind and monitor as we move forward here. Why don't we, jump into the next section of the report, which was, what do researchers think about implementation of AI into market research. And I think this is where we'll get into some of those points that you mentioned around, perceptions of AI. So do one of you want to take this one and talk about some of these?
Yeah, I'll be happy to jump in here. So, to me, when we launched this, I had honestly no idea where these weren't the leaders of market research organizations. These are people in a range of positions within the research community, from small companies to big companies. But I didn't know if people were going to be threatened by it or excited by it. And here we find that 3/4 of the world's market research community, are telling us that they've got a mostly or very favorable view of AI, and about an equal number, 72%, say that they think it's going to make their job better. So I think this is a very optimistic view, and I think it's quite an important jumping off point as we think about how to introduce training and help people get the most out of AI, is to realize that most people are looking at it favorably and want to jump into it and believe that it will help to improve not only the outputs of what they're doing, but to make their jobs more interesting. And we'll get to some of that through both the quantitative and also what some of the qualitative told us. We did a series of one-on-one follow-ups with some of the respondents in our survey, and I think some of those quotes are quite interesting.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing I would say is, like, you could just see it in the quote here. Some of the stuff we've already talked about. The person said, over the next 2 years, I think it's going to explode. It's like, how does AI become the trusty research assistant to hopefully make their job better? At least I hope so. So I feel like that's where you start to see the color being added on to, with some of the qual on top of quant.
Right. No, it helps, I guess, make that 72% more real, right? That's a high number. I believe AI will make their job better. And then you see comments like this. So it's good. I think, like you guys kind of going into this, I thought, well, there's going to be a lot of negative sentiment around AI and maybe taking people's jobs. Even though I don't believe that, I feel like that's some of the narrative in the market. But definitely this kind of shifts that on its head, I think, in terms of the 72% believe AI will make their job better. Pretty interesting findings there, I would say. So these are some of the more qualitative quotes that I think we got. Do you want to talk about any of these, or just move on to more of the findings?
I just think it does give some color. We've got videos from these people too, and we'll be posting some of those videos. I think it's worth reading each of them, just because I do think it fleshes this out. So I'll do the first. Anthony, you can do the second. So the first one was from someone on the market research agency side, who said the goal is to have AI doing some of that upfront heavy lifting, where we sometimes have to get into the weeds. It would allow us to raise up a level and really see the forest through the trees and provide more strategic recommendations for our clients. To me, it could elevate the entire industry. And that's, I think, what people, I think that's the promise here, that we can, do less of the stuff that is the drudgery part of what we do, important, but, can be get a little overwhelming, and it'll free people up to spend more time thinking about what it means and give advice to their clients from someone who spent his life on the research agency side. Anthony, you're a corporate researcher, so why don't you represent our second person?
I'll take the second quote there, but I kind of like the same sentiment. So if I could step away from all the minutia and just focus on the story, I feel like I can make a difference. Sometimes you feel a little bit more task oriented versus being a strategic partner. It would really allow me the time and energy to actually focus on creating the more meaningful story for the insights that might be the new groundbreaking versus just reporting on the data. And I would say, I feel that's even in my job today. It's like, how do we spend less time on the data pulling and the I guess you would say the hindsight and more the foresight and the strategy work. And I think that's where, if we have these tools that take the day-to-day work and some of the minutia work, it can help elevate and get out of that work and focus more on the strategic.
Yeah, no, and I would echo what both of you said. I think what can we do to take some of these things that take days or weeks and put them in, to a minute's time frame, I think is exciting and very doable, even with some of the tools out there today. And obviously, technology only gets better with time. So definitely exciting. And these are great quotes. In terms of the current use of AI in the workspace, this is where some interesting things came out. Ed, what do you think about some of these points?
So this is consistent with the 33% that we saw earlier. This is just a different way of asking the question, but roughly the same numbers. So about 40% are making a lot of use or some use of AI in their jobs today. That means a lot of room to grow. 60% are not yet involved very much. But I think some of the use cases on the right-hand side, and when we get in a few minutes to sort of talk about what the power users are using, I think we can see that, literature reviews, report generation, those are sort of the two top things that people are using it for now. To some extent, questionnaire development. And then I think sort of the earliest days, only 21% are currently using AI for sentiment analysis, for social media or unstructured data. A lot of opportunity for growth there. Some very interesting, solutions that are in the marketplace now, and more that I'm sure are being built. And then the last one on the top uses, but again, it's only 21% right now. So early days still, but analyzing data across large data sets, being able to really connect the dots. I think there's a lot of possibility there. Early days, when we get to the power users, we're going to see some of these things being much higher. And those, in an adoption curve, it's going to be those power users who are sort of telling us kind of where all this is going. Some of the things that are toward the bottom of the list of things people are using, one of them at the very bottom is trend forecasting. Only 10% are using it for that. But Anthony, I know that's a topic that's of interest to you as someone who's, needing to help your company understand kind of what the sales numbers are telling us and where we can expect the demand to be in the future. So you want to just touch a bit upon
that?
Yeah.
I think that one's interesting too, and we'll see it later in the data as we look at some of the subgroups. But that was one, even though it still is lower, one that we saw pop a little bit more for the client corporate researchers. While we might both agency vendor side and corporate researchers be using it for literature review and report generation to an extent, there was a little bit more of a pop for trend forecasting. And I, again, hear that as in my day-to-day too, as we continue to say we have a ton of data around us. How are we ingesting all of it together to predict better and stronger outcomes? So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, even though it might be low today. It might be low today, high impact tomorrow, kind of with the same framework that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And to me, what sticks out is the current uses of AI are, I wouldn't say more commonplace, but I think they're easier to picture. Whereas the bottom are maybe a little bit harder to wrap your head around and think about, like, hey, how are these going to work? Especially if you're not in technology and haven't seen the kind of a pathway to these. So, but to your point, Anthony, I think that the trend forecasting and even some of these other ones with like automated survey data analysis definitely are all possible. Maybe a little bit harder to, kind of get behind and wrap your head around, but we'll be there in the future for sure.
I can also just stay there for just 1 second. Sorry. I can also envision that, again, we have to remember this is early days. A lot of companies, Dan, I know that your company and others, the tools are being invented week in and week out. But remember, this is a survey across people from all sorts of different types of companies. Some may not have a heavy tech focus yet, and they're just beginning to introduce AI into the equation. And I think it's common to let's embrace AI with the things that are a little easier to do, and you can envision it. Okay, I gotta write a questionnaire. Let me just see what AI tells me some of the topics might be. Some of these other tools, maybe there's 1 or 2 people within some companies who are working on this, but the rest of the rank and file haven't had access to it yet. So I think this is going to remain a very dynamic area for years to come, and certainly over the course of 2024 and into 2025.
Yeah, no doubt. I 100% agree with you there. And then so, this is interesting too, because we often think about like a lot of the positive and negative risks, but this puts, some actual data behind it. What are some interesting things here around the positive impacts or negative impacts for researchers?
Yeah, I think I can talk through it first, and Ed, feel free to jump in as well. But I at least was looking at this, and you can see how there's a lot of positivity and optimism about the future and using it. But clearly, you're seeing it across different parts of the work, whether it's time savings and some of those more routine tasks, really driving efficiency for data processing and analysis. Obviously, like we see that this report generation and automation was one of the things people were using today. So you could just see how it goes across kind of all the tasks we might be doing, all the way from the pre-planning, drafting, building, all the way through to the analysis, storytelling. It does go back to the person's quote who kind of said it becomes the research kind of insights assistant, and it can almost help you across the full spectrum, to even get to what was, the 46% who say even improved insights. That's something that I personally have a lot of passion behind, because I feel like in our world, with the teams we have, even though our teams are made up of incredibly intelligent, smart researchers, you can only generate the insights for which you have time to pull the data or look at whatever the open ends say or what the analysis might have said. And if you could have systems in place or assistance through technology that can help you harvest and unearth some nuggets of insights that you might not have otherwise either pulled the report that way, looked at the data in that certain view, that you can uncover, really meaningful, interesting insights that might have otherwise gone undiscovered. So that's something that I think is like a really interesting opportunity that I think we're even seeing come across here in line with things like helping drive efficiency, bringing together different sorts of data to make better decisions. But the other thing I would say is on the risks, it's like, even though there's a lot of opportunities and, optimism about how it can make your job better, people acknowledge the risks. It's like things that we hear about, bias in the AI, concerns about data privacy, really depending on AI and less human judgment. Like, we are an industry of human researchers. Sometimes you hear like human anthropologists, like really understanding why people do what they do and how to craft business strategies to make better experiences and products for them. It's like, if you take the human element out of it from a researcher standpoint, how do you make sure it's not just all the technology and the machine driving the decision? So there is like how do we partner with it versus let it take over? And the one thing that I'll just say before I hand it over to Ed, but Dan, you mentioned it earlier about my job being at risk.
Mm-hmm.
I personally thought that might be a much higher thing to pop from a risk standpoint, because I do think that's what I see in the news all the time. Like,
it is,
XYZ person did research and they find that 40% of jobs are going to be eliminated due to AI. But like, people in the industry and people that actually have probably gone through the cycles of technology and new things coming out, it doesn't seem like it is the most fearful thing from a risk standpoint, with only 13% thinking that their job's going to be displaced. So I think that was like an interesting learning, and we could talk about it from even like an age of how experienced you were, where you saw that come through. But definitely with it being at the lowest, I think that was just an interesting thing that we found with some of the risks.
Yeah, only 13%. That's kind of surprising, honestly.
Yeah,
given what we see in the news and elsewhere.
Given the amount of articles, it's more than 13% that I feel like I see the job replacement being the most talked about thing. So it's interesting.
It's a big headline for sure, obviously. Ed, what do you think?
I think Anthony gave it a comprehensive overview here. I would just like to sort of hone in on that one point about increased dependency on AI leading to less human judgment. I think there is I think there's a need to understand that sort of this AI assistant can help us, but we shouldn't abrogate our responsibilities to make sure that what it's producing is correct. We all know there's hallucinations and other possibilities, and its judgment might not be correct.
Mm-hmm.
These machines are only as good as they've been trained to be, and I don't think anybody's are trained to be 100% accurate yet. And there was a fascinating piece that I read maybe a month or two. A Harvard Business School professor did some research with Boston Consulting Group about where AI really excelled within the BCG consulting universe and where it came up short. And it really did well on things that were creative, new product concepts, new ad ideas. But when it came to data and analytics, there was a quote from one of the BCG researchers who said, it looked so accurate, we didn't really check it that carefully. And I think that's just something for us to all be mindful of, that, we can't just take what it says, hand it off, and, say our job's done. And if the machine's wrong, the machine's wrong, because the machine's not going to be right all the time. And that's going to be on us if we haven't spent the time making sure that it is accurate. So let's not forget that something that's intended to enhance the efficiency of what we're doing doesn't give us the right to just turn it over and hands off. So.
Right. No, I think that's a good point. And even if it wasn't AI, if it was a human doing the analysis or the coding or coming up with these figures, you would check them, right? So I think you still need to instill that same level of discipline here, but it's easy not to because you think, oh, it's a computer, right? It's AI, it'll get everything right. So there definitely is still that risk. But that study's interesting. Wow, that is a good point. Interesting. So let's move on here, just to the thoughts of future, or thoughts on future of AI rather, in the market research world. What are some interesting points here that maybe you guys want to touch on?
Yeah, Ed, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I think so this segues from what we just showed. We said that my job being at risk was the lowest on the list of concerns expressed there, and this is just a different way of asking it. We've just said it, but I was quite surprised by this. Only 4% of the people we spoke to said they're very concerned about their job being at risk as a result of AI. 37% say they're a little concerned. 60% no concern at all. So far, I think the optimism is in part because people see it as being a job enhancement and not a risk. But I think what's interesting is on the right-hand side, when we look at, who's the most concerned, either very or at least a little concerned on the upper right there, the people have been in the industry less than 10 years. So some of the people who are doing that entry level work that maybe we're saying that the AI is going to do more of it, that's the group that's the most likely to say they're very or at least a little bit concerned. But at the same time, if you look on the bottom left, it's also those who think it's going to improve their job. So there's a little bit of, if I'm entry level and this is going to sort of do some of those entry level tasks, maybe my company's not going to need me. But by the same token, if I can move along quickly enough, I'm probably going to be an early adopter. That's who tends to embrace technology first, to the people who are newest to an industry. And many of us who have been around for a while tend to look to the younger generation to be the early adopters and learn from them. So they're also the ones who are the most likely to believe that it will actually improve their job and maybe let them get to some more interesting things sooner than they might otherwise have.
Yeah, and the only thing I would say is when we were talking about these results, again, this is anecdotal, we're just extrapolating the numbers here, but the people with the most experience, they've seen some stuff. They've been through the industry. They've been through probably many cycles of things that have come out, and probably there were articles 10 years ago about whatever new technology replacing people, like computers, like insights, research surveys are going to go away. We won't need us because the surveys are now going to be all done on the computer. And I don't know, but whether that's the same thing, it's like if you've been in the industry long enough, you probably see how we will just evolve as humans and workers to have different kinds of jobs and different ways we probably leverage the technology, and not, people who have been around know, it's not going to just replace everyone and we're going to be all out of jobs. It's just the kind of work we do and the kind of skills that become important and the training that becomes important probably just starts to change a little bit.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I love how that 30 plus years of experience still is optimistic that it'll improve their jobs. Maybe finally someone will take some of this menial work off my plate.
I'll stick around for another day and hope it gets better.
Exactly. Yeah. Finally, I don't have to do these things. No. Awesome. Why don't we take a few minutes here with the time we have left and dive into some of these subgroups? I know obviously agency versus corporate is an important subgroup, and I know that you guys did some research around these two cohorts. So you want to talk a little bit about this and maybe some of the differences here?
Yeah, I'll hit it quickly. Just high level, we were really interested to see how adoption has happened or not happened across the two different groups. And one thing that was pretty clear is that even while, there's still room for adoption to grow, people on the consulting side, agency side are seem to be using it a lot more, almost double the rate than what corporate client researchers have been. The usage for it wasn't too different from the top ways those that are using it say that it's being leveraged in today's work, like literature review, questionnaire development, sentiment analysis. Whether you're on the corporate side or the agency side, that is still the top ways in which AI might be being leveraged. The one thing that did change as you went down the list for things that popped is people on the agency consulting side using it a bit more for report generation, while those on the corporate client side, we talked about it earlier, a little bit lower, but trend forecasting. And one thing I just wanted to speak to, because I'm on the client side now, I've spent a little bit of time on the agency consulting as well, and the report generation one, it it feels like it's a really great space for people to have that assistant helper, because boy, sometimes when you just have a blank PowerPoint that's looking you in the face, it's hard to know where to start or what's the trends, what's the themes, and just to have a little bit of a starting point to get the momentum going, get the help going, where even me as the client, it doesn't make me nervous or make me upset to hear that people on the agency vendor side would be using technology to help with report generation. It's like I'm not paying for a report. Like, sure, that's a part of the output, but it's like I want the thought, the leadership, the strategic thought from my partners. So even for them, the more you can get out of the weeds of drafting a report, making PowerPoint pages, and more being my strategic partner really is a place where I think we take the industry forward and make everyone more satisfied with their jobs and better outcomes as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And then this is more anecdotal, Anthony, but obviously you're on the corporate side now. Do you feel like the corporate researchers are looking to the consultant and agencies for guidance with AI and how to use it, how to implement it? And that's why the usage might be a little bit higher?
That's an awesome question, Dan. We actually saw in our qual, so we didn't have questions about some of that, but in our qual that we did, that was one of the themes that came out. Was for a lot of people, they're saying, hey, like, I just need my partners to come to me and say, this is how you need to use it, or here's the ways other clients have used it. Like, they don't, what we were hearing is that they don't have time to do, the audit of the landscape and figure out how, we should be using AI in the work. It's, how do I go to my trusted partners and learn from them? But really, if you're on the agency consulting side, one of the key things we heard from those we talked to is it's important to have the tangible use cases, spend less time talking about the technology and the fancy way that the model works and the AI works, and more the outcomes, the business case, the use cases, so that those maybe who are in the corporate client side, they can then start to adopt the tools through you, the partner who can provide it, and then take advantage of the benefits of it versus spending time trying to figure out how to use AI in the day-to-day.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great point. Ed, anything here that you wanted to add?
I would just say to the last point, this is also anecdotal, but I've heard that on the corporate side, there's been some companies who say we'd like to use it, but legal is still kind of pumping the brakes on us. So encouraging agencies to go ahead, build what you're doing, because when our legal finally says go, we're going to want to go. So I think some of this is a reflection of that as well, but it doesn't mean sit on the sidelines. I don't think this is an expression of lack of interest on the corporate researcher side. I just think sometimes, you work in a big, $1 billion company. It's different than working in a more nimble agency in terms of what can be done right now.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Why don't we move along here into more around what the true issues most say about their team is using AI. So some of these points here. Ed, what are some of the interesting things here around the favorability of AI?
Well, I think so. Well, one of the things we wanted to do was kind of find the groups that the segment that was the most active right now in terms of their use of AI. And so on the left-hand side, what we're calling the power users, everybody was favorable, 3/4 for the power users, 94. But we can see on that sort of dark green bar at the bottom, among the power users, they're much more likely to say they're very favorable. But the real importance of this chart, I think, is on the right-hand side. Having looked at those top usages of AI, when we see the people who are the most active right now, everything is way higher than it is for the sample as a whole. And some of those items that were at the top of the list, but with 30-something% usage today, literature review, 2/3 of these power users, questionnaire development, a majority are using it today. Report generation, a majority are using it today. And then in the high 40s, sentiment analysis, large data sets, it just gives us an idea that the people who have jumped in first have a much broader range of things they're using it for today. And I think it helps us to know where the rest of the industry, as we all begin to embrace AI, where we'll be in the coming year or two.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Anthony, we've got to get your trend forecasting up here, man. It's only 20%.
I know. Got to bump up those numbers eventually. In the next year's edition, when we do the research, I'm sure it'll be a little bit higher.
All right, fair enough. That's a good point. All right, why don't we round it out here with the power users of AI and talking about the positive opportunities and negative AI risks. So what stuck out here, Anthony?
Yeah, I think just like real quick, we kind of just broke down the data by those that are saying most of their team is using it.
Yeah.
Opportunity wise, the things that popped for the total sample still really popped as the things that tended to be the highest. So analysis, data processing, time saving, automating reports, some of that stuff we talked about earlier, you see popping up to the top here. But I think what we actually found interesting was more on the risk side. You know, when we think about those that have adopted and have most of their team using it, I would have expected their risk to be a lot lower. It's like, all right, they've adopted it. They have most of their team using it. They must not see as much risk in AI as what the total population did that we talked to. But you can see it in the numbers. The things that the total said that they were worried about or that we should be mindful of the risks for, even the power users that say most of their team is using it, still recognize those same risks, like bias in the AI, data and privacy, less human judgment. Even the job replacement is at the lowest. So it's like those things that tend to pop for the top. Even if you're in it and your teams are using it day to day, there's still the acknowledgement of it. So, I mean, that was just one thing that stood out to me. Again, I would have thought if you're a power user, you have your whole team using it, the risk might not exist as much, but clearly there's still the acknowledgement that the industry has some things we need to be mindful of. And before everyone jumps fully into AI and using it for everything, we need to make sure we're figuring out how to reduce biases, the hallucinations, figuring out the data privacy aspect, and ensure that our industry continues to stay a thoughtful place where we understand humans, people as people, and how to make things that make their lives better and easier from a human-centric way, and not just rely on the machines and the technology that might be out there. So that was what popped for me. I don't know, Ed, if you had anything else.
No, I think that covers it well. The one thing on the left-hand side that popped to me was the rank order is the same, but the biggest gap is around the improved insights. That's where the power users are already seeing the opportunity to a much higher degree than the rest of the sample.
Awesome. Well, this full report is available for everyone listening. I put the link in the comments. It's available for you to download and take a look at. I know there'll be more qualitative insights coming out. Ed and Anthony, anything else that we should touch on before we wrap up today?
I think that's it. I mean, we're really excited about the research. As Dan mentioned, we'll hopefully can get a copy of the report and look at it. We'll be coming out with our broader love of learning industry report that, again, is kind of the research about the research industry amongst the researchers. I like to try to use that as much as I can. So excited for that to come out in the next few weeks. And yeah, I just appreciate, Dan, you having us on and us talking about it.
Yeah, I would like to thank you as well, Dan, and also to thank your team for doing the quantitative research for us, for fielding this study, and to Brand Riffs for doing the qualitative for us. It's we're a not-for-profit, and we very much benefit from the support of companies like Question Pro and Brand Riffs. So thank you.
Absolutely. Happy to be involved. A very interesting study. Can't wait for the full results to come out. Maybe we'll have you guys back for that as well. So, all right, everyone. Thanks. Appreciate you tuning in, and have a good rest of your day.
Thanks a lot.
Bye, everyone.